All right, well, welcome to another episode of the Rest and Recovery Podcast. With me is Dr. Mindy Pelz. She is a holistic health expert especially in the realm of fasting, intermittent fasting, women's health, author, 2 times author, I think, if that's
Well, actually four times. Yeah.
Okay. Congratulations. Yeah. That's awesome.
Thank you.
I guess your most recent book is Eat Like a Girl. Is that correct?
Called Fast Like a Girl.
Fast Like a Girl. I apologize.
Yeah, no worries.
I had written that down wrong, but excited that, as we were talking offline, a couple of acquaintances and friends in common in the health and biohacking space. And I've seen you around for a while and really interested to get into intermittent fasting and the benefits that seem to be growing more and more as we learn how to understand it, but also how to do it well. And then the impacts on men and women is a little different, and how to go about that is really different.
Yeah.
But how'd you get into this? I mean, doctor, you've been in the health space for a minute. What's your background and how you came to this conclusion with maybe specifically on intermittent fasting, that evolution?
Yeah. So I've been involved in obsessed, maybe is a good way to say it, with the human body and health since I was young. When I was 16 years old, I was trying different health strategies on myself. And when I was in college, I was a competitive tennis player, and I got my undergraduate degree in exercise physiology and nutrition, and went out into the world, thought I wanted to be like a personal trainer and help people become fit, and found that I had a passion for holistic health in general. So I went off to chiropractic school and came out of that, launched a very big family practice here in Silicon Valley. And the first 10 years of my practice, it was really impressive how you could do straight structural work on people. You could adjust them, you could do muscle work on them, you could give them rehab exercises and they would get well.
Right.
But about 10 years into my practice, something changed. They stopped healing as quickly. And so I started to lean into my nutritional roots a little more to see exactly why people were not getting this same healing effect that they got 10 years prior. And what I found is about that time, we were seeing the introduction of glyphosate into our food system. We had, more processed foods. We were pretty much at that point about 20 years into the low fat movement that became high chemical foods for people.
Yeah.
And I just got really clear that we needed to start to make better food changes. And at that time, there was a lot of discussion about wheat belly had just come out. And there was a lot of discussion about the new type of wheat that was being grown. And so people were looking at food, but I really started to discover the science of fasting in a deep way. Dr. Osumi had just won a Nobel Prize in medicine and physiology for a term called autophagy, which really is the body's ability to heal itself without food. And so I became obsessed with the science of fasting, and I applied it to my patients. I applied it to myself. I took it to social media. And what I saw within a very short period of time is that there literally has never been such a good tool for healing and health and metabolic health like fasting. And so my obsession has just grown since then.
Okay. Well, it's pretty fascinating, and I'm recent to my understanding. I've always heard of fasting, but more from a spiritual perspective, right? I'm a Christian, and I've heard of things like that, and many other foods include that from a spiritual perspective, but not really understanding, the physiological benefit to that as well. But I didn't realize that autophagy was kind of a more recent discovery, I guess you could say, or understanding.
Yeah, so autophagy, 2015, Dr. Osumi won the Nobel Prize in medicine and physiology. So that it was less than 10 years, right? That we've known of this concept. He had been studying it for years, but he had finally figured out that when you go without food, the cells will turn within and they will repair themselves. So if we just stay on this concept for a moment, because it's so important. Autophagy is like turning on a cellular healing switch. And there are ways we can turn it on. We tap into autophagy when we sleep. We tap into autophagy when we exercise. But really, the greatest way to tap into autophagy is through fasting.
Okay.
And what the intelligence of the cells does is that it looks around at this inside of the cell and it says, okay, there's no nutrients, there's no food coming into the cell. So we better kick out the things that aren't working in the cell. Let's get rid of the bad parts of the cell. Let's get rid of the viruses. Let's get rid of the bacteria, and let's repair what we can repair.
That's amazing.
Like, amazing, right? Like if you
Yeah.
think about that, like
Yeah, it just
we
does
have
it on its own.
yeah, you don't have to take a supplement. You don't have to do it. Like there is an intelligence in your cells that will figure that out. So, and that's what he got the Nobel Prize for. But here's the crazy thing is that then the pharmaceutical industry tried to come up with a pill that would stimulate autophagy, and they couldn't. So it kind of got buried. This concept of autophagy got buried until the biohacking movement, the health movement, brought it back and said, hey, this is a core principle of fasting and why fasting's working so well. So it's really profound what our body does in the absence of food, but autophagy is one of my favorite concepts to highlight because you can literally grow your body stronger year after year by bringing in this concept of intermittent fasting. You don't have to fast long to get autophagy.
So what is the time frame to get to autophagy? And is it simply omission of food? Is it
Yeah,
what would
it's so
let's define that.
yeah, so there's two pieces to autophagy. First is you've got to have your blood sugar either stay the same for an extended period of time or start to decline for a period of time. So basically, you cannot have your blood sugar rise. And the time period, it's debated often, but what I've seen in the research is autophagy gets turned on at 17 hours. And it hits max at 72 hours without your blood sugar rising.
Okay.
Now, there's another part of this, and this is sort of advanced autophagy lesson here, which is you can't have nutrients come in. So that, remember, you're trying to signal to the cell, hey, we need to repair ourselves. So the only way to signal that is through the glucose not rising and nutrients not being sensed. So this is the same thing if people take supplements in their fasting window, if there's a lot of talk about minerals and aminos, I still think they can be great in the fasting window, but they may pull you out of autophagy because the nutrients will be signaled by the cell and you may not get as much of that repair.
Okay. So really to get into straight autophagy, really at best water. That's about
Straight
it.
water. Yeah, you got it. Straight water and go 17 hours and see how you do.
Okay. What are some of the experience expectations that could come along with that other than probably the obvious of like some hunger pangs and like the trigger of like wanting to pick up that burger?
Yeah. Well, let's talk about the benefits first. Like when you stimulate autophagy, we have to remember that every cell in our body has a life cycle. So like the eyes, those is a matter of days where the cells are living and then dying. I think the liver, it's a matter of a couple of months. On a cellular level, the whole entire body reboots itself within 7 years, where old cells are sloughed off and new cells are coming on.
Okay.
So what happens as we age is we start to create what we call senescent cells. And senescent cells are dysfunctional cells, aging cells.
Okay.
And they live and die quicker and they accelerate aging the more senescent cells we have. So when we stimulate autophagy, what we're doing is we're getting rid of these aging cells. So what you will notice over time is literally you will age slower. I have been doing fasting almost 10 years now because I learned about, so let's see, it's 2023. We're coming on 2023. We've got, so a little less than 10 years.
Yeah.
And I will tell you that my energy is better now at 53 than it was at 43. Wow. And a large part of that is just because of the continual tapping into autophagy to get rid of the old cells. So you'll slow down the aging process. The other thing is that we're seeing a major immune boost with autophagy when you stimulate autophagy. Now, this is really cool. And I was screaming about this during COVID, but only the people following me were hearing it. But when a virus comes into a cell that's in a state of autophagy, it shuts down viral replication, and that virus can't replicate itself.
Really?
Yep. So it's great for the immune system. It's great when you have a cold. It's great for those people that didn't want to get COVID. I got.
It's like that old, like, start a fever, feed a cold kind of.
That's right.
Like, which is it?
Yeah. Yeah. It's I would say starve a fever and a cold.
Yeah.
Especially if it's viral.
Okay.
Because like when COVID hit, I guess it was last fall. So that would have been 21. My husband and I both got COVID for a week. And so I played with the principles. I was like, okay, let me eat one day and let me fast one day and let me see how I feel.
Mm-hmm.
On the day I fasted, like the symptoms by the end of the day, the COVID symptoms were completely gone.
Wow.
On the day I ate, I was eating well, I would actually feel more of the cough, more of the head cloudiness. I actually felt worse. So it's really interesting how we can use it as an immune boosting tool as well.
Yeah. And just the concept of what we're talking about, it makes sense when you explain it, but like the idea is very counterintuitive because,
In what way?
at least to me, well, like, you think energy, I need to consume something.
Yes.
Right. And in this case, and even like you would think the cleansing process, I got to put new in to get the old out. Like it's
Right.
like pushing it through. But in this case, it's more like you got to give it some time to like think and be like, okay. And then because our bodies are, as I understand it, are designed for life, right? It's this designed to defend ourselves.
Yeah.
Good, bad, or indifferent at times. But anyway.
Yeah. So it's such a good point because here's the thing, and this is why so many people are catching on to fasting or doing it more and more, is because it gets easier the more you practice it. I don't know any diet that gets easier the more you do it, especially when people are trying to lose weight. So, and it's because it works within your primal design. So in Fast Like a Girl, I highlight a hypothesis that isn't talked about enough, and it's called the thrifty gene hypothesis. And the idea was if we go back to the cave person day, in order for us to survive the harsh conditions of going long periods without food, there was a genetic expression that had to emerge. And if you had this gene that allowed you to go a long period without food and actually make something called ketones in the absence of food, you survived those primal days. And the people who perished in those days didn't survive. And so that thrifty gene didn't continue. It's the gene that continued throughout, the history of humanity.
Okay.
So right now, there's a belief that we have this gene, all humans have it in us. And we're doing the opposite. The people that are eating all day long are going against their genetic expression and are creating what we know as metabolic syndrome. Whereas in the primal days, the people that didn't survive were the ones that didn't have the gene and couldn't fast. We're seeing that right now that we're going against our genetic expression by eating all day long, and it's killing us. So we are made to fast, which is why it gets easier.
So how do you do it well? Because, I'm guessing too, I guess it depends on the state of the person, where they are in the goals, if it's weight loss or just improved enhancements, or like, because I would think if somebody's already kind of leaner, they might think, okay, fasting's not for me because that's somebody who needs to lose weight. Or is that a...
So the important thing to know is that fasting is not calorie restriction.
Okay.
It is time restriction. So here's how you look at it. When most people get up in the morning and then they eat, they'll eat breakfast, and then they keep eating throughout the day, and then they eat dinner at like 8 or 9 o'clock, and then they sleep. So they're really only fasting while they're sleeping, 6 to 9 hours, somewhere in that time period. So what we do is we start to tell people, okay, what we want to do is take your eating window and compress it. So instead of getting up and thinking I'm going to eat all day and thinking that breakfast is the most important meal of the day, which is now proving to be completely wrong. And I can explain why in a moment.
Yeah.
I want people to start to think of there is a eating window. So for me, let's use me as an example. Today it's 10 o'clock my time. I'll be off interviews around noon. So I will open up my eating window at noon. And so from noon till about 5, that will be the time in which I eat. After 5, I shut that window down. And then I don't eat. So I'm eating the same amount I used to when I was eating all day. I'm just doing it in a concrete time period, leaving longer for fasting.
Okay. Okay.
Is that helpful?
Yeah, it is. It is. I'm just thinking practically is this like adults only? Would you recommend this for kids? Is my first, I had my dad hat just came on, and I'm thinking about that in the mornings, and,
Yeah.
and then different lunch times too, when some of these kids will get up and then they're having this very early lunch or whatever, just the scheduling of all that.
So the thing to remember again is the human body is designed to fast.
Okay.
So this is not dieting. This is not rigidity. So let's start there. So anybody who is, the teenage years and beyond, can really do this efficiently. And I think for seniors, it's an incredible, I was thinking about you said about your dad. I just feel like both my parents are in their 80s and they fast. I just feel like it's such a key tool for them. So teenagers is about 16, 17 is where I'll tell parents, like, you can start chatting with them about fasting, but fasting really has to be the person who's doing it has to be their idea.
Yeah.
So what I've seen a lot of parents do is they get excited about the concepts of fasting, especially if they have a teenager that's struggling to lose weight. The last thing you want to do is make it your decision for that person to fast, or you're going to create eating disorders.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's more like, I'll give the example of my son when he was in the 9th grade. I was like chasing him down the driveway with breakfast, like, hey, you didn't eat breakfast. This is before I knew much about fasting.
Yeah.
And he would just sort of brush me off. And then one day I said to him, I'm like, are you not hungry? Like, I noticed you wake up 10 minutes before you have to leave to school. He was a freshman in high school. I'm like, are you not hungry? And he goes, no. I said, okay, well, when are you hungry? He said about 10 o'clock. So we set up, I basically created an eating window for him. I said, okay, at 10 o'clock, you're going to start eating. We have dinner at 6. That's your eating window. I just need to make sure you're eating at 10 o'clock. But that was how I fit it into his natural rhythm.
Okay. Okay. Cool.
So and it worked.
Yeah.
And he's now in college and he's doing it on his own, and it's helping kids find their natural rhythm. The younger kids, you just have to be playful about it because, again, you don't want to create any food rigidity or eating disorders.
I was going to say, and that's the key thing is I think we've been so hammered with the diet lifestyle, and like it's not, or not, excuse me, diet as a fad or a just a temporary thing to hit a particular goal rather than a lifestyle of like eating well or eating healthy.
Right.
And the unfortunate things that come along with that.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think in the book, I call it a fasting lifestyle, and there are 4 parts to it. And the number 1 part to building a fasting lifestyle is knowing what you're doing. Like what is it you're trying to accomplish? So in our community, we have some people that want to lose weight. We have some people that want to improve brain health. We have some people that want to slow aging down. We have some people that are trying to reboot, the dopamine receptors in their brain. So I advocate for 6 different length fasts, and I map them all out in the book, but I talk about how your tool for fasting and my tool for fasting may be completely different.
Okay.
And that's okay. In all nutrition and diets, we've been searching for this one size fits all.
Right.
There is no one size fits all. And especially when you look at women and the complexities of our hormones, there is no one size fits all.
Yeah. Yeah. Even woman by woman, man and women alone. Right. So you've got the different things going on with genetics and geography. So you mentioned brain health. how, with the rise of that being a major issue, it seems like, and I don't know if it correlates to your earlier comments around the no fat diet for the last 30 plus years.
Yeah.
There might be a causation correlation, but the fact that, mental health and brain health, like arthritis, not arthritis, Alzheimer's and
Alzheimer's. Yeah.
dementia are on the rise at a pretty aggressive pace. How does this help with brain health?
Yeah, thank you for asking that because that's really out of my desire to improve metabolic health for the world. When we were in the pandemic, my desire to improve metabolic health was because it really was an immune. If we could improve metabolic health, we could improve people's immune systems. As we come out of the pandemic, the number one topic on everybody's mind is mental health.
Mhm.
And to your point about Alzheimer's, women are more affected by Alzheimer's than men.
Really?
So, yeah.
I was
So
not
we
aware
have
of
to, yeah, we can chat about that. And 1 out of 3 seniors are gonna die with Alzheimer's. So why is this happening?
Yeah.
And it's really twofold. First, Alzheimer's is being coined diabetes of the brain.
Mhm.
So we got to get insulin and glucose under control. I don't know a better tool for getting insulin and glucose under control than fasting. Like, especially when you're dealing with a food addicted world.
Yeah.
It's really hard to make food changes, but I can take your food that you love and if I ask you to put it into an 8-hour eating window, leaving 16 hours for fasting, research shows us that you actually won't see elevations to insulin, hemoglobin, A1C, glucose, cholesterol, blood pressure, like all those metabolic markers are become not an issue, even though you're eating a poor diet, but you eat it in a short period, leaving longer for fasting. Now your body can heal. So when we look at Alzheimer's, we've got to get people metabolically healthy. That's number one. Second thing is when you fast, you are create something, two things. One we talked about was autophagy, and the second was ketones. So ketones will go up into the brain and they will start to repair the neurons in the brain.
Mhm.
And these neurons are carrying information back and forth between, we have trillions of neurons. So when we look at where Alzheimer's exists in the hippocampus and it's protected by a blood-brain barrier. They stopped looking for Alzheimer's medications because the blood-brain barrier is too hard to pass. Well, guess what can get through the blood-brain barrier is a ketone. So it can go into that part of the brain where these plaques form with Alzheimer's, and it can start to repair the neurons so they don't degenerate. So you literally have taken two of the biggest issues for Alzheimer's and you've handled it just by teaching somebody to fast.
And I guess to the point of the metabolic issues out there, the metabolic chaos that seems to be exploding, it then scales to all those other corollary diseases, I would say.
That's right. That's right. We've got the chronic disease issue. We thought we had an immune system issue. We have a chronic disease problem. And if there's anything the pandemic showed us is that the world is not healthy. And so we thought it was a viral problem. Yes, the virus was new, but
Yeah.
it landed on bodies that were already not healthy.
Well, and that was my theory, not to throw out my penny and a half on the whole thing. I don't have any acronyms after my name, but it was like, to me, that exposed the weakest link in any person because the symptoms were so different and the outcomes on what somebody looked like. And there were some common denominators clearly, with elderly and overweight, but it seemed like the expression, like my wife and I got it, we responded totally different. And
Hmm.
to me, it was just that's my thesis behind it. But to me, it kind of affirms what you're saying is what's going on with the underlying conditions, that it just exposed how severe we've got it globally
Yeah.
or nationally.
Yeah, when we first went into the pandemic, I've been trying to get the world to prioritize their health for years. That was part of my practice and
Mhm.
why I've written so many books. And I thought, oh my God, this is amazing. Finally, people are like inside their house. They're going to have to take care of their health. And yet we had no messaging coming from our leaders of any country really talking about here's what you can do. And so
Arguably the opposite.
the opposite. Yeah,
Yeah.
sit and wait until we find a drug for you. And we have a lot more power than that. Our body has a lot more it can do to heal itself that we're not highlighting. And what I love about fasting is that once you start to see results with it, you can't give the credit to anybody but yourself. Like, because you're the only one that did it. It wasn't the food. It was literally, it's a way for people to tap into their own healing power.
Yeah. That's amazing. Um, is there a downside?
Yeah, so there's no like long-term downsides, but I will tell you some snags people get themselves in.
Right.
So the first is, remember that when you start to learn to fast, you are speeding up the healing process inside the body. And sometimes healing is uncomfortable. So let's use a fever as an example. All a fever is the body senses there's bacteria or a virus, and it needs to raise its temperature to burn that infection out. But yet it's not very comfortable. So nobody likes a fever, but it's a necessary mechanism to be able to burn out an infection. With fasting, we see some of those same mechanisms show up. So when somebody first learns to fast, sometimes they can get brain fog. Sometimes people get rashes. Some people get constipated. Some people will hold on to weight. These are rare. But that's really, in the book, I talk about how do you course correct through all of that, because that's just showing detox pathways are shut. There's a lot of hacks you can use.
Yeah.
So I would say the first one is any adverse reaction that shows up, there's a reason for it. Because your body's made to fast. You just got to go hunting for that reason.
Not necessarily a bad thing per se.
No, not a bad
It's
thing.
more the bad stuff's getting out.
That's right. The bad stuff's getting out and it's struggling to get out. So you don't feel good. So you gotta give it some assistance. The second area that we see problematic is people fall in love with fasting, which is amazing. And they do the same fast over and over again. So this is kind of how the birth of my whole YouTube channel, how it launched, was that all the people who had read Jason Fung's book, The Obesity Code. Have you read that book?
I haven't. I'm familiar with it, but I haven't read it yet.
Yeah, it's a really great book. And to the listeners who are wanting to know, like, where the birth of fasting for weight loss came from, Jason Fung was really the first one to bring it to us. So in the Obesity Code, he really talked about how important compressing your eating window was. And we ended up with a whole like movement of what we call 1 meal a day people. I call them O-matters. They were doing the same one meal. They'd only eat dinner over and over again. They lost tremendous amount of weight, but then they got stuck. And so all those people found my YouTube channel and they started learning how to do what I recommend, which is a fasting variation.
Okay.
So I think the most important thing is for people to understand, once you get a rhythm with fasting, you need to vary your fasts. And Fast Like a Girl is all about how women should vary it, because we need to vary it different than men. So those are the only problems, but it's really like sleep. Sleep is good for everybody, but not everybody can do it easily.
Yeah. Yeah. Or even, you've got the different chronotypes, right?
Yeah.
And sometimes we have different windows of what's optimal for each person.
Yeah.
So it's kind of going, I guess, like the intermittent windows on whether it's 5, 7, 8 hour windows of eating.
Yeah.
Could vary for person or goal.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think it really highlights a concept in healthcare that more people are talking about, which is personalized healthcare.
Yeah.
This idea that we go into our doctor's office and they take a measurement and all of a sudden our blood pressure, our cholesterol is high, and we all go on the same medication. There's a lot of different reasons why blood pressure goes up. There's a lot of different reasons why cholesterol goes up. Genetics is only one of those. Like with cholesterol, women, in order to make estrogen in the first part of our cycle, our body actually naturally raises cholesterol in order to make estrogen. Well, if a woman walks into her doctor's office at day 9 of her cycle, when her body's got cholesterol at its highest, is the doctor looking at the fact that maybe the high cholesterol is due to where she is in her cycle?
Wow.
Yeah. these are kind of the things that need to change in
Yeah.
healthcare. So we have to start to look into the nuance like that and find our own unique path.
Yeah, I mean, and to pull on that thread from the women's perspective, my understanding too, and other guests I've had on, is that a lot of the macro science data doesn't account for that at all. And a lot of times things are tested on men and then applied to women when the
That's right.
physiology is wildly different.
Yeah.
I think I had a Basque guest say we're like 4 different people in a month based on cycles. So
Yeah.
it's can you pull on that a little bit, in your book on supporting women's health in that regard?
Yeah. So the thing about and what I'm hoping will the conversation that will crack open when Fast Like a Girl comes out is that our sex hormones, progesterone, estrogen, and testosterone need vastly different things from us. Men, you guys are really driven by testosterone. Testosterone goes up into your brain and converts into estrogen, and it gives you, you're also driven by estrogen, whether you're aware of it, but you need testosterone in your body to make estrogen. Women, we have 3 hormones that need vastly different things that are made in vastly different parts. So let me give an example. Estrogen needs glucose to be low. So great for fasting, great for keto. When you bring glucose down, estrogen can go up. Progesterone's completely the opposite way. The week before your cycle, you actually your body naturally raises its glucose, naturally makes itself more insulin resistant so it can make progesterone. Now ask any woman this and she'll tell you, I crave carbs the week before my cycle. Yeah, she craves chocolate the week before her cycle because she needs magnesium. She craves carbs so she can bring glucose up. Once her period starts, give her a couple days, she's not hungry. Yeah, because estrogen wants you to bring down glucose. And then with testosterone really, there's no foods that can accelerate it, but testosterone really needs support from the liver and the gut and needs your toxic load to be low.
Okay.
So if you're eating a lot of toxins, you're going to tank your testosterone. Both men and women will. But each one of these sex hormones has a different personality, has a different requirement. So when we look at women that are eating the same, fasting the same, exercising the same throughout our whole cycle, it makes no sense.
So they almost have to have different menus for each of the weeks, really, based on
Right.
based on that, and adapt it so you're maybe not grabbing for the chocolate and grabbing for something else that
That's
might
right.
optimally support rather than
Yeah, which is what
maybe
the whole
grab the
book.
Hershey bar, but
Yeah, don't do a better chocolate than that.
yeah,
But
yeah.
yeah, but that's the whole premise of the book, is showing when to eat and when to fast according to your hormones. We're rolling out an app with the book as well that will show people what exercises will be appropriate for women for their cycle, what supplements are appropriate. We have a huge hormone illiteracy problem, and
Yeah.
it begins with women. We don't even understand our own hormones.
Well, I certainly don't. But,
Yeah.
as a husband, father of 3 girls,
Oh,
uh,
wow. You
yeah,
need to know.
so I need to know, I need to understand because, how am I gonna best support them?
Yeah.
And
Yeah. Yeah. I had a friend of mine who opened up a really cool clinic, biohacking center in Oregon. And I went up there and gave a lecture on eating and fasting for women. And he was in the room, and there was like 4 other men in the room, and otherwise it was all women. And I told the men in the room, I said, sit tight because you're going to learn a lot about your wife. You'll learn a lot about your daughters. So that was in July. I just saw him this past weekend, and he said, I think your next book needs to be teaching men how to understand women's hormones. Cause he said, you just improved my marriage in that one talk you gave. I understood my wife's hormones. And he's like, and I'm able to communicate with my daughter differently. And
that's
what I
awesome.
think, isn't that cool? Like what
Yeah.
I think we don't know is, let's just take the menstrual cycle. Let's use like your how old are your kids? Are your daughters?
12, 14, and 16.
Oh my God. Perfect.
Yeah.
Okay. Here's what you need to know. So if you knew their cycle, the front half of their cycle, day 1 through day 10, is when they are building estrogen. When estrogen builds, we're going to be pretty verbally outgoing, we'll be more gregarious, have better mental clarity. So you're going to feel more connected to us then.
Okay.
If you have a conflict that you need to address to us, you're going to want to come in during ovulation, which is somewhere between day 11 to day 15, because we have the max amount of estrogen. So we are going to be able to, cognition wise, we're going to be able to really articulate ourselves to you. We have the max testosterone, so we have motivation to resolve conflict with you.
Okay.
And we have a little bit of progesterone where we're going to be calm. So if you actually, with all of your daughters and even your wife, if you came in during ovulation with a conflict or any challenge you needed to discuss, you're going to have a more open and receptive brain at that time than any other time of the cycle.
Wow.
The week before their period, the best thing you can do is just say kind things to them, love on them, know they're going to be a little bit where, the week before our period, we can't, if cortisol goes up, we're more reactionary. We're a little bit lazier is not the right word, but we're a little more inner. We might want to sit on the couch more. We're going to eat more carbs, but we definitely don't want to talk conflict with you.
Right. That's all right. I think you just saved my marriage and
Right?
with my daughters, like in 3 minutes.
Right.
My brain is like kind of all over the place because like conflict management. I mean, that's a huge, just understanding that context within a family, and knowing when to address those hard things.
Does your wife work?
She does. Yeah.
So the other interesting thing I'm learning for myself is that when you're in a work mode, both men and women are using testosterone in a work day.
Okay.
It's what motivates us, drives us, gets us to do things. But what happens is at the end of the day, women really, well, both sexes, but especially women, need to balance that testosterone out with estrogen. You would benefit too from just, and I'll explain in a moment, with a little bit of an uptick of estrogen, but I'll explain how that works. So a woman at the end of the day, in order for her to balance out all that testosterone, she needs to do something that brings her joy. She needs to verbally process, which you've probably already seen this, where she'll come and be like, all these things happened to me during the day. She needs to get on the phone and talk to a friend. She needs to do anything that fills her up with love and joy. You give her anywhere from a half an hour to an hour, and you're going to have a totally different wife. A man at the end of a testosterone driven day, he needs to go and withdraw. He needs to go into a man cave. He maybe needs to go work out. He wants to sit and watch sports. It sounds completely sexist, but this is the way that these hormones drive us. So now let's take a husband and wife that are both working.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, she wants to chat with you and you want to withdraw. And you're both trying to rebalance the testosterone that you used in that day. So you're both working within your chemical system, but that's where all these arguments start.
Yeah. That I mean, that's awesome. That's just amazing to me.
Yeah.
The design of the two, how different it is, and even understanding that not simple, but straightforward, complex situation, to how to better respond. And kind of affirmation, I would think, is like, it's okay that I feel like I need a moment to recharge and like get off to the side for a moment and just be introverted a bit. Conversely, affirming that for women and my wife, for me to understand that she wants to really kind of unload the day, or and communicate.
So a couple ways that my husband and I do this is, first, understand when she's unloading the day, literally what she's doing is bringing her brain back into balance. She's raising estrogen. You don't need to fix anything. You're going to want to fix it. Yeah. But if you just let her just talk, and then you just say, how can I support you? Do you want to go take a bath? Do you need to go for a walk? Like, give her an opportunity to do something that brings her joy, and you're going to have a much happier wife for the rest of the evening and even into the next day. So what I say to my husband sometimes is, I'll say, you know what, it's been a big day. I need to just go and do something and withdraw. Our kids are out of the house now, but I need to do something that just kind of reboots my brain and I'll be back. So he understands what I'm doing it as opposed to taking it personal. And
Yeah.
that, I think, once we understand our hormones, we can have that kind of conversation and it doesn't become a personal fight.
Yeah, because I mean, I think, I was having this conversation with a friend of like communication is the root of all problems. And
Yep.
like, but understanding the underlying why that you're talking about so that you can just have the better words to even communicate how you feel at the time, as opposed
That's
to,
right.
well, a lot of times it probably doesn't work out that way.
Yeah. Or even think about your 16-year-old. That's a tough age
Yeah.
for a 16, this being a teenager, especially a teenage girl right now, is not what it was when I was 16. So when she comes home, if you have something that you really need to get across to her, spend some time talking to her about something that lights her up. Do
Mm,
that first. Give her 20 minutes to talk about something that brings her joy, and then try to come in with something that's a little more like, hey, we got to talk about your grades, or you didn't clean up, or whatever.
yeah.
But if she comes home from a day of school and you go in with, hey,
Too hot.
you didn't do this, 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 and this, her brain is going to shut down and you're going to get nowhere.
I cannot confirm or deny experiencing that at all.
Well, I wish I had known it with my teenage daughter, who's now 22. I would have parented a lot different in her teenage years.
Well, this is really illuminating because, like, I never would have thought that fasting and understanding, you know, between fasting and the cycles that the benefit, right?
Yeah.
Life,
Yeah.
not just kind of the medical health side of it and how that correlates.
Yeah. And that's what I'm hoping with this book, is that it's going to be a conversation starter. There's the first part of the book is really about the science of fasting. It's great for both men and women.
Hmm.
And then the middle part, I dive into hormones, and I feel like once women understand, we understand our hormones, then we can start talking like this
Yeah.
with the men in our lives. And I also, I laugh because I came up with the name Fast Like a Girl just because I strongly feel like, just like we throw different, we do a lot of things different because of our mechanics. That's why we should fast different. But I really think men will get a lot out of this book too, especially if they're trying to understand their women in their lives.
Yeah, and I think, yeah, regardless of the domain of engagement, like men and women, we make up half and half roughly of society, and you're going to run into it. So at least
Yeah,
being able to empathize, and then who doesn't want to enhance their family life?
right.
Like,
Exactly.
no,
Yeah,
nobody gets into marriage and having a family to have a miserable time with it.
exactly. Yep.
So I think
Exactly.
that's huge.
Yeah. And
Seems
just like, if you think about it, just like we're eating and fasting, if a woman's not doing it in accordance with her hormones, we also are doing that in our day to day, in our relationships. Like, you're going up against conflict, or connection at perhaps a different, a wrong hormonal time, and so you're going to get a pushback. I had a woman, a flight attendant, came up to me on a plane flight a couple weeks ago, and she said, when she read my other book, The Menopause Reset, she realized that she might have not divorced her husband.
oh wow.
And I was like, yeah, because she understood her hormones. She understood what she was going. She got divorced at 45. She's like, I started to understand what hormonally I was going through. And I wish I could have gone back and explained that to my husband.
Yeah,
That's profound.
that is profound, and it kind of amplifies my thought a second ago of like it's relationship driven, not just the
That's
science of
right.
it, like understanding ourselves better, that awareness factor
Yeah.
um, changes the context of a lot of things.
Right. Right. Yeah. It's really cool. And especially as a dad of three.
Yeah.
Yeah, you definitely are gonna want it. The more you can understand it, the more you guys can talk more, they can understand it.
Yeah.
The more you can have conversations, and it's not personal. It's getting to know yourself and your hormones.
Well, and I think if we want to be a fully engaged, I'll speak from the dad perspective, obviously, but we've made some of these things taboo to the point where you lose relationship because of it. I
Yeah.
think with your kids, and you can't be a fully present father if we make female hormones weird, or
That's right.
conversely, moms and their sons. Like we have to be able to address that uncomfortable conversations in a constructive and healthy way, self-reflecting, to be a better dad, to be able to empathize and work with them better, and
Yep.
just create deeper relationships.
Yep.
with
Yeah. So like one of the things that I recommend is know your daughter's cycle, know your wife's cycle, so that you can see where, like, definitely the week before her period, just nurture her, just,
Mhm.
just be kind. And if there's something that really needs to be handled, do it at maybe ovulation day 10 to 15. Like, if you know that, then you're going to have a better door into to her brain, and then everybody's going to synergize more. So it's really cool concept once you start to gather it, and it's not that difficult to understand. You just have to kind of know the parts of her cycle, and you might start even just asking, like, your wife to track their cycles, and then you could just say, hey, what part of the cycle are they at right now? And then you'll start to see the pattern.
That's incredible. I appreciate that insight, and look forward to applying it.
Yeah, let me know, report
Yeah,
back, let me know how it
will do.
works.
So
Yeah.
excuse me, when is your book due to release?
It comes out December 27th.
Okay.
So, and we are going to do some really fun things in January for people who have the book. We're going to, if anybody ever wanted to try a 3-day water fast, we're going to do a worldwide water fast with the help of Hay House, who's the publisher of the book. We'll do that the first week of January. And then I'm going to take people through, there's a 30-day reset in it where they can go through different level fasts. I'm going to take people through that. So it's really important to me that this book doesn't just collect dust on somebody's shelf. I want people to use it and put it into action. So the fact that it's coming out at the end of the year, the fact that a lot of people have health goals in the new year, that's what we're trying to get out to the world, so that that people can start off the year right.
I think it's a huge opportunity for everyone. And the depth of it is, again, it's not just about eating windows. There's so much more
Right.
to it, and the impact at
So
scale.
true. Yeah.
Mindy, I really appreciate your time. I think I could probably keep talking to you further. We're kind of coming up on the hour, but I usually like to close things out with a few questions, a bit of a hot seat, not, or maybe
Love it.
mildly hot. What are you reading right now?
Oh my gosh. Okay. Well, since I'm on hormones, I'm actually reading an old book. It's called Woman, and it's won a Pulitzer Prize, which is AKA it's written really, really well. So I'm definitely deep into that book right now, just because I'm working on my next book, which will be on the changes that happen to the female brain after 40 as we go through menopause.
Okay.
So that's kind of the hot book that I'm reading right now for me.
Okay. Okay. Cool. So what are you listening to right now, be it music or podcast?
Oh gosh, podcast. I'm all over the map on podcasts. It takes a lot to hold my attention. Yesterday I was on a plane. I was listening to David Sinclair, who's got a neuroscientist. And then I moved over. I've been really trying to understand Lisa Mosconi's work of the XX brain.
Okay.
It's all about, and so she was on Sean Model. I have so many I love. I can't say that there's one specific one, but yeah, those are kind of what I listened to yesterday.
Okay. Great. What's your go-to rest and recovery method?
My go-to what?
Rest and recovery method.
Oh, okay. Well, this is mine. I have a hyperbaric oxygen chamber at my house.
Very cool.
And I go in that. I would say my other one is walking. I started walking throughout the pandemic just to calm my nervous system. So I would say walking is also a big one for me.
Okay, great. Well, Mindy, thank you so much again for your time, expertise. Look forward to when the book comes out. And I think I'll be placing an order for at least 4, it sounds like.
There we go. Thank you, Scott. I appreciate it. Yeah. Yeah, thank you for the opportunity. And, I would just say, from the women, thank you for caring. I mean, you obviously have a high motivation because you have 4 women around you, but I just feel like if we could all understand each other from our hormonal lens, relationships will be smoother. So thank you for caring.
Yeah, absolutely. Appreciate it.